Tom, I thought we'd start with the by-election. There are four of them around the country today. I know we're very focused on the one here, but there are a couple of others that are of particular note, right? Including one in Ontario where, did I hear this right? The Conservative candidate is actually supporting the Liberal running?
Yeah, a very nice MP named Dave McKenzie who stepped down. He said he had mobility issues. He was getting on in years. You know, he'd been the chief of police and then did a stint of 18 years in politics. I would say more along the lines of a progressive conservative. You know, doesn't go along with more of the kooky stuff of Poilievre. So he steps down. And then all of a sudden, Poilievre contrives to bring in one of his chief organizers from his leadership campaign and run him as a candidate. Now, of course, they've got to hide it and make sure that the guy doesn't, it's not too obvious he's being parachuted in, but he was parachuted in. And the people in that area, you know, we're talking Woodstock, Ontario, that area, the riding's called Oxford, folks didn't take kindly to it. And this guy, Dave McKenzie, said, frankly, I'd vote for the Liberal this time around. He's an honest guy. It came out of nowhere. It's a very odd political situation for somebody who's been a steadfast, loyal conservative for 18 years in the House of Commons, just basically saying, don't vote for the conservative candidate this time. So people aren't too worried because it really is the type of safe conservative riding that you would expect them to be able to pick up quite easily. But in the past, it's been Liberal. So we'll see if that can play some havoc there. Running through the other ones quickly, we've talked about Portage-Lisker, Maxime Bernier running there. That was their best result for the People's Party of Canada. Last time around, they got 22%. Poilievre is going to try to hammer him into the ground, just try to reduce him into the single digits because he has to be able to show voters, you're wasting your time with Bernier. The only party that can beat the Liberals this time around is the Conservatives, and I'm the guy to do it. So that's going to be a big battle there as well. There's one in Winnipeg. Jim Carr passed away, former minister. His son's running in his place. You know, that sort of emotional connection after somebody passes will probably help. It's the type of riding that will swing. Liberal conservative, but I think it's going to be solidly Liberal with Carr's son running there. Of course, all eyes will be on Westmount, NDG Westmount, of course. But interestingly enough, in the last election, if you go through the polling, there were quite a few polls that the NDP won in the NDG part, not so much on the Westmount side. Fewer socialists up on the mountain. But all kidding aside, it's going to be interesting to see whether any of this plays into the election results this time. I'm not convinced that Anna Gainey is in any real trouble, but I did find it interesting, and we talked about it on Friday, that out of the blue, they decided to have a flash mob, and they were going to bring in Justin Trudeau. So, you know, obviously a little bit of that spirit was going to help her, because then I don't think they're nervous about losing the election, but I think that they're worried about the way the thing is being set up right now. I talked to a senior person who's been doing this stuff for years. They have been getting Bill C-13 on the doorstep. They've been getting it in the nose. They've been getting it literally on every doorstep. So the English-speaking community is riled up. A lot of people are staying home. A lot of people are telling the Liberals they're not getting their vote this time. And it's a Liberal riding, and it shouldn't be this way. You know, it shouldn't be that hard. But I guess it's one of those rare cases where a big issue like that has really gotten to the heart of the English-speaking community, and they're reacting to it.
So I told you last week how I was very conflicted and that I'm not accustomed to feeling that way. I did finally vote, and I asked them today. We were talking about this earlier with James Minnie. I said, how's the turnout been, and how was it for the advance polls? So I'm curious for your take on this. They said advance polls were dead, Tom. Nobody was coming out. Today, a fairly steady stream. So does that indicate a last-minute rallying? What do you think that indicates?
So the advance poll, that is the number one organizational trick of the Liberals, and they are masters at it. They get everybody out that's a real identified Liberal. Even if you have to give them a piggyback, you get them to the polling station for the advance polls, so you don't have to worry about them on Election Day. The total for all parties for the advance poll was only 7%. That is really low. And the Liberals should normally have had 7-8% just putting out their vote. So, yes, it's going to be down. Look, Garneau got well over 50%. And the only safe prediction I'm making is that I don't think that the Liberals are going to be making anywhere near 50% this time. I don't think that Anna Gainey's in that much trouble. But I do hear that, a lot of people reacted very badly to C-13. And I think Trudeau knew it. They probably told him that on the doorstep it was hurting, but he wasn't going to back down.
And this failure to connect, I think, too, is just huge. Like we talked about, you thought she was probably being muzzled to some degree. But
it's what we call, there is actually a term for it. It's called a front-runner strategy. It's basically, why would you put yourself at risk? We saw it with Danielle Smith the last 3 or 4 days of her campaign, once they had the numbers and they were in there, said, okay, she's going to win, they just basically hid her from the camera. She was not allowed to get anywhere near a microphone. It's what you do when you know you've won, even if it frustrates a few people, in the media. It's just too bad. It's more important for us.
What would be the biggest surprise, Tom, to come out of this by-election for you?
I think the biggest surprise to come out of this by-election is the strength and the determination of the English-speaking community, which is often, still waters run deep type of thing. The community doesn't speak with one voice too often, but when Bill 96 was just too much, there was a big rally, and it was interesting. The then Liberal leader, Dominic Anglade, after some hesitation, she came out foursquare against Bill 96. So it proved that there's always that underlying ability to organize and get things out. On C-13, there's been no such thing. You haven't seen a big rally in downtown Montreal against C-13. But it's been talked a lot about. We've talked about it any number of times. And what's interesting is whether it's in the Gazette or in other papers or in other venues or on social media, people were picking this stuff up on C-13 saying, hey, this is a real danger for the English-speaking community of Quebec. Why isn't Trudeau doing anything about it? And why is he incorporating by reference Bill 101 into a federal statute that, as Mark Garneau correctly said, is only going to make life more difficult for the lawyers who have to eventually fight Bill 96? Why is Trudeau doing that? And that's the key question. And it's interesting that so many people in the community sharing that view. So we'll see how it plays into the numbers.
So last question, Tom. If it's Monday, it must be, of course, time for another Pierre Fitzgibbon ethics issue. So let's get to it. This time, a little friendly appointment and some taxpayer money to an ex-friend, an ex-cabinet employee. Who's this?
This is the weirdest one that I've seen. So this is a guy who'd been a couple of times a CAC candidate and had worked with Fitzgibbon, and he'd gone off and gotten himself a job at the Montreal Cardiac Institute, the Montreal Heart Institute. But out of nowhere, we find out that Fitzgibbon gave $200,000 of taxpayers' money to that place so that they could hire this guy. And just penalty flags all over the field. It turns out that Pierre is in Europe right now selling the aerospace industry of Quebec. And I think it's a good thing that he's in Europe right now. Mr. Legault is probably very happy about that. But this is pure Fitzgibbon. He's already said, he's on the record, I don't care what the rules are. He's a little bit Trump-like that way. It's just, I don't care, And what if you get banged out again by the ethics commissioner?
So what?
I don't care.
Yeah. Which kind of makes you wonder what happened. I know this is last week's story and they're not sitting anymore, but that whole, the housing issue with the minister responsible, who we found out who used to flip homes on her own. And I think we talked about this so many times before. Are you expecting anything will happen to her? Because we know if there's an issue and it's a woman in the CAC cabinet, it's one thing. If it's a man, it's up until now been something else.
Very big, very different treatment by Legault. He defended her today. He was asked about her at a press conference, but it really was gruesome. I mean, to have a housing minister show such little compassion and empathy and heart dealing with an issue. There are front page stories of people who worked hard, played by the rules, who are homeless right now because there's just no place to stay in Montreal. So I think that having a housing minister said, well, instead of complaining about not being able to assign or transfer your lease to somebody else, stop renting, become an owner like me. That didn't go over great. And she's going to wear that one for a long time, as will Legault.
Just before we let you go, I want to touch quickly on this. You sent us this story about the battle on the Plains of Abraham, Part 2. So Émile Bilodeau, sovereignist, he is a Québec Solidaire supporter. Big, very harshly criticizes Bill 21, I think is the way to put it.
Right.
And
the
BQ is going to... Go ahead.
The last time he was out there on a Saint Jean Baptiste thing, a couple of years ago, Legault got all upset.
Yeah.
And saying, this guy's against Bill 21. They shouldn't have put him on the stage. And he was wearing a button, one of those Bill 21 buttons with, the red stripes through it. And so Legault lost it. So this time, it's the Parti Québécois. So because I've been in politics for a long time, I've been to this one on the Plains of Abraham any number of times. This is the most massive show you've ever seen.
Yeah.
Tons of great artists there, and they just fill up the Plains of Abraham. And there's always a speech at the beginning. You give some patriotic speeches about Quebec nationalism. So normally the Parti Québécois would have been dying to accept the invitation, except they've turned it down because they don't like Émile Bilodeau because he dares have an opinion different from theirs. I mean, welcome to cancel culture 101. And they're bending over backwards saying, no, we're not saying to cancel him. We're just saying if he's on the stage, we're not going to go. Oh, really? So there's a big difference between those two things, right? And this is Quebec. I mean, so intolerant of anybody else daring to have a view different. And the Parti Québécois already covered itself in ridicule when they started musing about whether Michael Sabia was Quebec enough. Did he? Was there enough Quebec nationalist fiber there? There's going to be some sort of blood test to follow for Michael Sabia. And this is the most horrible part of the Parti Québécois. Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon is careful to leave most of that stuff to other people. But this is a huge mistake. This is cancel culture. This is intolerance of anybody else holding a view different from your own. And I think that long term, not this weekend, but it'll come back after the show, but I think long term people will remember for many, many years that the Parti Québécois cannot even stand seeing somebody on stage who dares have an opinion different from their own.
You don't think their base is eating it up, though?
I think that their base is staying with Legault mostly,
okay.
And their progressive base, such as it was, young sovereignists like Émile Bilodeau, who are progressive, they're over with Quebec Solidaire. There's a reason why they only got 3 seats out of 125. That's probably 2 more seats than they'll get next time.
Fair enough.
We're out of time. I just wanted to know, you heard the story about the bus driver telling that little girl about whatever, and I said
great journalism by our friends over at CTV. Very well done.
And I said at one point, Tom, here's a perfect opportunity for someone, Eric Girard, somebody to stand up and say, you know what, this should not have happened. This is wrong. Is that going to happen?
I'm still waiting. I don't know about you guys, but what I saw from the bus company was, oh, he was right. That's how I read the reaction from the bus company.
Mm-hmm. They haven't apologized.
No one in the government to stand up and say this is wrong?
No, that's too bad. It's just those whiny Anglophones, the ones who are so privileged and the best treated minority in the world.
Yeah.
Especially those special needs kids,
Of course.
Terrible
Thanks,
story.
Tom.
They're the ones who really have to be put in their place.
Tom, thank you.